Time is one of the world's greatest mysteries. We don't know what it looks like, where it is, or what it's trying to do. Even the experts who claim to understand time don't. They say that time flows in one direction, but it doesn't make any sense to entrust time to the boy band that ruined the 2010s. They also say that it moves in a straight line, but this is impossible as well, because eventually time would hit a wall and stop completely. Or worse yet, a mirror, causing it to get confused and go backwards, potentially bringing the Nazis back. I think some of us would agree that that is an undesirable outcome, but this is all misguided and wrong. As proven by clocks, time actually travels in a circle, and circles are made up of millions, maybe even thousands, of smaller, different directions. It loops back in on itself. The cycle of time explains why there's a plague every 100 years, why your socks keep going missing even though you keep finding them, and why there are still young people, despite the fact that everyone keeps getting old and dying. It's this very concept that served as the inspiration for Sonic Generations, a game that revolutionized humanity's understanding of time, even if it went completely unnoticed. Sonic Generations explored the possibility of manipulating time to meet yourself in the past and rewriting the timeline, putting time on shuffle if you will. It would be interesting to meet yourself in the past. You could warn them about upcoming events that they weren't prepared for, or you could set them up to make them rich somehow. It's a dangerous but exciting prospect, and Sonic Generations explores this prospect thoroughly. I was so enthralled by the concept that I ended up owning 2 copies of this game, but these aren't the copies I'll be playing. Sonic Generations has regenerated in the form of a new version called Sonic X Shadow Generations. The cycle of time strikes again, and history has repeated itself once more. Only this time, there's a bit more to Sonic Generations. With a name like Sonic X Shadow Generations, I can only assume this will be Sonic Generations with a hot and steamy romance between the 2 hedgehogs shoehorned in. Will this be a new and improved version of Sonic Generations, or will it be 27.6 gigabytes of hedgehog porn? Only time will tell. Upon starting the game, you're presented with some options. You can play the standard Sonic Generations, or you can play Shadow Generations, which basically functions as a bonus campaign. So it's not the Sonic and Shadow love story we've all been waiting for. I guess we'll never find out who's topping who. It doesn't feel right to start with Shadow's campaign since this is primarily a Sonic game, so we'll do Sonic Generations first. Like I said, I own 2 copies of this game already, so I am pretty well acquainted with it, but who's to say it will be exactly the same this time around? This is a brand new edition, they might have made some brand new changes. The story seems to be the exact same thing though. It's Sonic's birthday, and his friends have thrown him a surprise party. But during the festivities, an unholy monster called the Time Eater kidnaps everyone, trapping them in a lifeless white void called Russia. Sonic's speed, for some reason, has the ability to free his frozen friends and restore the colour to the places he visits. Sonic's younger counterpart, Classic Sonic, also gets wrapped up in this time fuck, and the 2 hedgehogs together endeavour to defeat the Time Eater and return the timeline to normal. Even though time isn't a line, it's a circle. The story seems to be unchanged, and even though it feels like a pretty lame reason to travel through time, it does its job of at least being a reason. I will say though, I feel like some of the dialogue has changed. I noticed a lot of references to things that I didn't understand. Sonic at one point mentioned time stones. I don't know what a time stone is, so it felt very random and out of place. But beyond small things like that, the story is the same as before, and it's still okay. What I think has also remained unchanged is the presentation. That might be my fault for not remembering how the original game looked down to the last pixel, but as a whole picture, none of it seems to have changed at all. Normally when a game re-releases for a more modern console, they sort of zhuzh it up a bit. You know, polish up the models and lighting and all that, maybe remaster the music or something, just to make it feel newer. Like when a business or organization changes their logo to have a different font for the sake of modernity. But it doesn't look like they've done that at all. Not that they needed to, the game's soundtrack is absolutely amazing, and it looks pretty good too when you consider that it's an old game at this point. But I don't know, I was expecting something. I guess what this means is that beauty is eternal. Things can and do age gracefully, and it's probably why Sigmund Freud wanted to fuck his mum. Or whatever that was about. For those of you who are stupid, Sonic Generations is all about the bringing together of the old and the new, and its gameplay reflects that. There are 2 gameplay styles you'll be dealing with. Classic and modern. Classic of course being the Sonic gameplay of the past, and modern being the Sonic gameplay of the present. Interestingly, no Sonic gameplay of the future. Strange that they decided not to include that. We'll start with Classic because that's what the game starts with. Every Act 1 sees you control classic Sonic in the style of the classic games. They're entirely side-scrolling levels, with none of the modern flourishes such as boosting or homing attacks. It's back to basics here, with some fun and simple levels that encourage speed, but also demand precision and adaptability. By that, I mean there are hazards you need to avoid. For as straightforward as they are, classic levels are a lot of fun, even if it's quite strange if you think about it. It's all presented in 3D, sometimes the camera angle changes to highlight that. But then all of the levels are just a straight line of side-scrolling challenges. Could Sonic not just go around them? He can't when it's all sprites and pixels because there's no third dimension there, but there is one here. Maybe he's just not used to it, so it didn't even occur to him to go around. Around probably isn't even a word where he's from. Despite that, the classic levels were enjoyable. Sonic controls well, the levels are well designed, I can't really complain. On the other side of the coin is modern. Every Act 2 sees you control modern Sonic in the style of the modern games. Instead of being entirely side-scrolling, they're mainly 3D levels with a focus on boosting through at breakneck speeds. Thankfully, Sonic survives, because he doesn't have a neck. Modern Sonic's abilities include this boosting, which is a staple of modern Sonic games. Admittedly, while the boosting is fun, I find it can be a bit unruly. Speed is the name of the game, but there is such a thing as too much speed, and it's very easy to accidentally boost in an unintended direction or off into a bottomless pit. That said, when it behaves itself, it's a lot of fun. Sonic also has his homing attack, which is a really satisfying move to pull off, because it not only defeats enemies, but it also chains and combos into other level elements, allowing levels to flow in a very satisfying way. It's a thing of beauty. With the constant switching between classic and modern gameplay, Sonic Generations is a very dynamic game, with lots of variety in its levels and gameplay. It's also cool to see these iconic levels from across Sonic's history return in both classic and modern forms, breathing new life into these gems from the past. Especially Crisis City. As we all know, that level is from a game that is shit on an apocalyptic scale, so to see it return here in a good game is a wonderful thing. That said, there actually aren't that many levels in this game. There are only 9, and even if you split them into their acts, that only totals 18 levels, and most of them only last a couple of minutes. There are also boss fights, which are a lot of fun because, like the levels, they borrow some of the best from games of Sonic's past, and these are some really fun fights. The rival battles are cool too, if a bit easy, but that's still not a lot of game. The game has bones, but where's the meat? The meat actually comes in the form of challenge acts. To make progress in Sonic Generations, you need to not only beat Acts 1 and 2 of each level, but you also need to complete a certain amount of challenge acts to earn boss keys, which will open the doors to each boss. While you don't need to do all of them, you can get away with doing a minimum of 9, there are 90 of them. They're silly little challenges that involve completing unique objectives. Examples include using a certain power-up, beating a doppelganger in a race, or making use of the powers of another character. While they're fun little distractions, I feel like the level to challenge act ratio is kinda fucked. 10 challenge acts for every level? Couldn't we have just had more levels instead? I'd rather that, to be honest. And it's not like the series doesn't have enough levels to do that. There are plenty of good ones like... and I could go on. I do feel like they missed a trick there. It would have been nice to have more. But overall, Sonic Generations is a solid package. It's a great game with fun, dynamic gameplay and levels, and brilliant presentation. Its only problem is that I don't think there's enough in it. With a few more levels, I reckon it would have nailed it. But you know what's great about this? This isn't just Sonic Generations, this is Sonic X Shadow Generations, meaning there are a few more levels. It's time to enter the body of the ultimate life form, similar to what I imagine Sonic would be doing based on the title of this game. Let's see what Shadow Generations is all about. Shadow Generations is essentially an alternate parallel campaign to what's going on in Sonic Generations. It begins with Shadow aboard the Space Colony Ark, who receives the call from Rouge. Rouge asks him if he plans on showing up at Sonic's birthday party, but Shadow insists he's busy working, which is the funniest possible way they could have kicked off the story. Shadow's little investigation leads him to taking part in the first level of Shadow Generations, and holy shit, what an introduction! I was blown away by how good it was. Let's start with Shadow himself. Shadow plays a lot like modern Sonic in the sense that he can boost and he has a homing attack, although Shadow's is slightly different because he teleports around to do it. But Shadow has a lot more to him than just that. Aside from his trauma and complicated personality, Shadow also has other differences to Sonic. Shadow can double jump, which honestly doesn't make that much of a difference, but it's still a difference. But Shadow is also able to briefly stop time with Chaos Control. As long as he has enough power-up juice, he can freeze all enemies and obstacles in place for about 5 seconds. It's a wonder Sonic ever beat this guy. This is a very useful power, as Shadow can use it to get past otherwise impossible obstacles. Shadow can also fire projectiles in the form of Chaos Spears. He just has a lot under his belt. He's hung with abilities. But what I was more impressed by was the level itself. It was insane. It clearly took heavy inspiration from Sonic Adventure 2's Final Rush and Final Chase, but it felt like its own thing. It was dynamic and full of surprises, it was action-packed and fast-paced, it was just a lot of fun. It made the levels in Sonic Generations feel a bit boring, I'll be honest. What I was absolutely not expecting was some alien starfish transporting Shadow into this weird psychedelic city dimension. I definitely didn't see that coming, and the presentation was great too. The music was thumping and energetic, and it all looked great too. It was a brilliant opener. After the level, Shadow unfortunately couldn't escape the fate the other characters were caught in, and also ended up kidnapped by the Time Eater and stranded in Russia. Although Shadow's Russia is actually a 3D hub, which was interesting. Well, it got interesting. In the beginning there's bugger all, and more only became available upon the completion of Space Colony Arc Act 2. Because there isn't a classic Shadow, the Act 2s in Shadow Generations take a different approach to pure side-scrolling. Well, most of it is pure side-scrolling, but it doesn't feel like it is because a lot of it is shown from this diagonal camera angle. The Act 2s of Shadow Generations are structured like side-scrollers but don't look like them. It's weird, but I like it. It was enjoyable. I was preferring Space Colony Arc Act 1 because it was just more exciting and full of more surprises. That's what I thought, until Shadow sprouted a pair of demon wings and started flying. I must admit, that did catch me a little off guard. I never knew Shadow had the ability to do this, so I was very confused at why this was happening, but it was definitely welcome. It was just another way that Shadow Generations was keeping me on my toes and keen for more. Sephiroth the Hedgehog is clearly going to be capable of things I've never seen him do before, and I was excited to see what they would be. And also why. That was the main thing I was thinking about. The why is explained by the story. Like I said, Shadow Generations is a parallel campaign to Sonic Generations. They both happened at the same time. Even though there is no time because it's a timeless void in Russia, but you know what I mean. But rather than take on the Time Eater and rescue the birthday party guests, Shadow instead takes on this alien demon overlord thing called Black Doom, who I suppose is grooming Shadow to become a harbinger of destruction on its behalf because he has alien blood. I'll be honest, a lot of this went over my head. This is clearly from a game I haven't played. My guess? Shadow the Hedgehog, but it could also be from Mario and Sonic at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games. Along the way he encounters characters that the Sonics don't, like Omega, Big, Orbot, Cubot, and perhaps most importantly, Gerald Robotnik and Maria, who are the reason why Shadow is such a complicated brooding mess of a person. Shadow gains a lot of abilities throughout the game by absorbing the spunk of these alien creatures, but his wings don't return until the end. These Doom powers range from basic things like being able to fire multiple projectiles at once and beating the absolute shit out of an enemy to move a long distance, to completely changing Shadow's physicality. He can grow a manta ray out of his feet like some sort of fungal infection to surf along the surface of water, he can turn into a squid monster to swing from sludge balls and swim in sludge like Splatoon, and finally he can sprout wings to fly at the expense of some rings. These abilities completely change the game. The platforming goes from what is essentially modern Sonic to something almost unrecognizable. There is still a lot of normal Shadow in there, but the levels have so much more to them. Using these Doom powers to traverse these levels makes everything so much more dynamic and interesting than it would be without them. And even though they look kind of gross with the tentacle-like design and the general ooze, they are pretty cool to use. It's almost like they breathe new life into these levels from Shadow's past, changing how they play and making them feel fresh. And it was cool to see some other levels from the history of the series return in this way. Space Colony Arc was a big one, being the focal point of Shadow's origins. You've got Kingdom Valley, which, like Crisis City, was in an absolute shitstorm of a game and deserved a second chance at life. And I'm glad it got one, because this version of it is fantastic. You've also got levels from games that released after the original Sonic Generations, which is actually kinda cool. There's Sunset Heights, a level that I remember from Sonic Forces, and Chaos Island, a level that I don't remember from Sonic Frontiers. It was kind of jarring to see these levels appear here, considering how far removed from the original Generations they are, but I liked seeing them anyway. They should have done this for Sonic Generations too. Add in new levels to commemorate the generations that came after Generations. Studiopolis and Mirage Saloon, anyone? This all applies to the bosses too, and while I don't know what the fuck a Metal Overlord or Devil Doom is, I do know what a Biolizard and a Mephiles is, and these were great incarnations of those fights. Not only does the re-emergence of these levels and bosses in a game with gameplay like this mean they're more fun to play, they're also improved in the realm of presentation. the levels look fantastic, and make the original versions look like shit. They're also more interesting when Black Doom interferes, warping everything into a sort of Demon Realm version of Radical Highway. And the music is pretty great too. It's harder than Sonic Generations, is that the right word? It's sort of more metal and edgy, I suppose. Edgy is a good way of describing the whole thing, and to be honest, the over-top edginess did start to grate after a while. Shadow himself is edge personified, he doesn't really need any assistance in the department, but Shadow Generations goes the distance to make him as edgy as possible. All of his demonic Doom appendages, Black Doom, the ominous hub music, even the UI looks edgy. I did at times think it was a bit much, but then they couldn't be cheerful about it because that's Sonic's thing, so I don't know. They did what they should have done with it, and it got the job done. For me, Shadow Generations definitely overshadowed Sonic Generations, and it's not just because it has more Shadow in it. Shadow Generations was fresh and exciting with excellent gameplay and presentation. It's the most fun I've had with a Sonic game in a while. It had great levels, a story that went over my head, but I'm sure it was decent, and even though I wasn't thrilled that it also had boss keys, making me do more of these dumb challenges, it was really enjoyable. But I don't want to take any credit away from Sonic Generations because that's a good game too. It may be short, but it also has some really fun and dynamic gameplay. The thing is, it's been a good game for a long time now, whereas Shadow Generations has only been a good game since I played it yesterday, which means it feels newer to me. But I don't think they should fight. Sonic and Shadow may fight in the game, but when they team up, Sonic Generations and Shadow Generations together make for an absolutely amazing package. It feels like a greatest hits of the whole series, a celebration, a birthday party of sorts. And it was absolutely worth buying a third copy for. And that's why Sonic X Shadow is the pairing we all ship, because it produces some immaculate results. You know, all this talk of generations and time travel makes me wonder what would happen if I met myself from the past. I think I'm going to give it a go. Tell myself what I've got in store.
Humdy-dum, I love playing games.
Hello, it's been a while since I've seen you. Or been you, I guess. You're a lot blonder than I remember. Or I'm a lot blonder than you remember? Oh, it doesn't matter.
Whoa, are you me from the future?
I sure am, and I have some things to share with you. Firstly, this is the formula for the COVID-19 vaccine.
I don't know what that is.
Neither did I, but eventually you will know what it is, and when that time comes, if you use this formula, you'll become a very rich man indeed. Also, you see that game you're playing there, Sonic Generations?
Yeah, is there a vaccine for that too?
No, but what if I told you there's a newer, better version of that game in the future?
A better version?
That's right, it's definitely got more stuff in it, more levels and shadow and yeah.
That's cool, I guess.
You guess? You were supposed to be excited.
Can I ask you something? What's the world like in the future?
I probably shouldn't crush your dreams with all the details, but look, it's not great.
Will I still get to play games?
You sure will. Speaking of, I better get back to my time. I've got some very unimportant business to attend to. It was good seeing you, and don't worry about that weird rash on your thigh. In a couple months' time, it goes away on its own.
Cool, see ya! That guy was weird, needs a shave too.